welcome to the Winning Daily Show. We're here for April the 7th. We got a little bit of picks, not a huge slate today. Getaway day in baseball, so we got a lot of day games to get into in the DFS main players of the day and some picks in baseball. A couple NBA games in a solid slate and a couple more tennises for tonight. Not too many lines up for tomorrow's matchups. Let's start out in tennis. Let's start with the men and the ATP in the Marabella Open. We're going with Gilles Simon plus 3.5 versus Lorenzo Siongo. Really like Simon here getting 3.5. I know Siongo's good in clay, but Simone's pretty solid in clay. I think he'll be able to handle the plus 3.5, so I really like the value there. And then we're going back to the Americans and the Charleston Open for the women. We're going to go with Sloane Stephens here again. She played really well the other night. We got our win there. So Sloane Stephens plus 125 versus Madison Keys. Now, Madison Keys is definitely the better player here, but I just think Keys hasn't been playing enough really to be able to handle this kind of matchup. So I look for Sloane, who's played pretty consistently this year. Despite all the COVID and the way she's played has been a little poor, I just like Sloane Stephens a little bit better here and getting a nice little plus 125 bump. All right, let's get into the baseball. Whole lot of day games today for getaway day on Thursday before they go back and travel back to another series. We're going to start out with the Seattle Mariners plus 125 over the Chicago White Sox today. Really like this matchup for the Seattle Mariners. Really like Justin Dunn. Think he's a solid pitcher. He was a top prospect in the Mets system a little while ago. Never truly developed, but I sort of like what I saw last year, and I think he matches up well. I think Dallas Keuchel is done, so I'm going to ride that while people still regard Keuchel as one of the elite pitchers in the league. I just think he's finished, and nobody quite knows it yet, so we're still getting pretty good odds on it. So I'm going to take Seattle plus the 125 today. We're going to take Flaherty and the St. Louis Cardinals versus the Miami Marlins. Just like this matchup. This is the kind of team that Flaherty really does well against. I think he'll be able to handle the poorest bats of the Miami Marlins, and I think there's really, really good value there at 115 for the St. Louis Cardinals. And then we're going to go with the Philadelphia Phillies minus 145. Nola on the mound today. I think that's a really good matchup versus the Mets. David Peterson on the hill for the Mets. And I just really like this Aaron Nola matchup at minus 145. Good value there, so we're going with the Phillies. On to the NBA. Big matchup of the 1-2 teams out west. Jazz versus Phoenix Suns. Jazz are in Phoenix. 1.5 point favorites, and we're going to take the Utah Jazz. I think the Jazz are the better team. We're going to go with the Utah Jazz. They haven't gotten 1.5 points really since they started their big run to take over the Western Conference. This is a big game, and I just think the Jazz are going to come away with it. Should be an entertaining one, but I'm riding the Jazz 1.5. I think there's a lot of value in that 1.5 point line. Speaking of a game that might not be really as important, the Washington Wizards versus the Orlando Magic. There should be a lot of points scored, but I think that line's way too low. Despite the Wizards' struggles, I think Wizards minus 3. They with Westbrook and Beal out there versus the Orlando Magic. Really, just they have no way to match up here. You got some Bertans. I just think the Wizards will dominate this game, so I think 3's a gift. And then we're going to take the Oklahoma City Thunder plus 5.5. Things that started to even out for the Thunder. They were the best team to take against the spread, but in the second half since the All-Star break, and really since a lot of their top guys have been missing, they really haven't been that, but Charlotte's missing just as many of their top guys, so I think Oklahoma City Thunder getting 5.5 here in two really undermanned teams. I like the Thunder at home here. So those are the picks for the day. Really light slate. We'll be back tomorrow, probably a handful more picks. Some soccer starts to kick off in the domestic league, so we'll have some of that. And let's move to our DFS players of the day. Let's start out in the pitchers. Whole lot of pitchers to get to. Also have Kenta Maeda matched up. Really, really like that. I think that's a really good value there. So I'm going with Kenta Maeda also in there. But the other one I'm really going with as well is Jack Flaherty. So Nola and Flaherty are probably my top two guys in rosters that I'm making for FanDuel. And then the next thing I'm thinking about is Justin Dunn. We mentioned him in our bets, and he's probably the third one. So a mix of Nola, Flaherty, and Dunn, and then Snell, Maeda, and Bieber mixed in there to sort of balance out some lineups. All right, let's go to first base and catcher. We're really not high on the top guys here. Hosmer, Goldschmidt, Bellinger, Abreu. Don't really love them today. The first one I'm looking at is Ryan Hoskins here at 3,700. Like the matchup versus the Mets. We already talked about that. Same with JT Real Matillo. I can't even say it. Rulamintio. We're going to have struggle with that one. I can't get it out of my mouth today. All right. You know who I'm talking about. Anyway, 3,400 for JT. And then the real two I'm really looking at hard are Vladimir Guerrero, putting him in a whole lot of lineups versus the Texas Rangers. And the big one I'm looking at, a lot of play on the Minnesota Twins today. I think they'll hammer the Detroit Tigers. So the big one I'm looking at is Miguel Sano at 3,000. I think there's a whole lot of value there. Then dropping down a little cheaper, Mitch Garver's going to get some love also for Minnesota in some of my lineups. And Victor Cartini for San Diego's getting a token start today. So at the number 8 slot versus San Francisco, if you're looking really, really cheap, I doubt he'll be in maybe more than one or two of my lineups. But at 2,300, you can do worse than getting some at-bats at least. But Sano, Guerrero will probably be my top two rostered lineup guys, mixed in with some Hoskins and JT Rumatillo. And then Mitch Garver will probably be in there a little bit. All right, on to second base. Once again, not looking really at the top guys. Simeon's gone all the way up to 3,300 as the top guy today. I will put in Jake Cronenworth for San Diego in a majority of my lineups, but really I'm looking way down here at the 2,400 mark at Jackson Profar and Ha-Seong Kim. Really like those two. Those will be my main rostered second basemen today. Just think that that's really where the value is because at outfielder, I'm really, really heavy on the top guys. Also looking at Ty France and Jorge Polanco. Pretty good price at 2,800 and 2,500 on FanDuel. Roster them up a little bit with a mixture of Cronenworth. And then to round out dirt cheap pretty much on the free end, Joe Panik's getting a little playing time in Toronto. I don't know if he can do anything other than stand upright anymore these days, but it's worth a shot to fill out the roster at really, really cheap prices. All right, we mentioned outfielders. We're using a lot of the top guys. Third baseman, I think you really need to use the top guys too. Arenado, Ramirez, Machado, I all have highlighted 37, 36, and 3,600. I think these guys really need to be on your roster today. I'm looking for big days, definitely from Jose Ramirez and Manny Machado. And or Arenado, I think will have a decent day. But Ramirez and Machado are the first two I'm looking at. On the cheaper side, Kevin Biggio, I definitely take a look at versus a nice matchup versus Texas. Wendell, Joey Wendell versus Boston. You know about Boston's pitching issues, so it wouldn't be bad. On the cheap side, who I'm rostering, I talked about him yesterday. I'm going with him again with Tampa Bay and Yandy Diaz. Once again, that Boston matchup springs its head. But most of my stuff's going to be Jose Ramirez and Manny Machado today. All right, on to the shortstops. And what do we got in the shortstop world today? We are looking to the top guys here, either Seager, Lindor, Bogarts. I'm a pass on all three. We're going to use our money on third base and outfield. We're going to drop down to Paul Jiang, who will be my main guy in a lot of my rosters at 3,300. We'll also throw some Bo Bichette out there. He's been hot of late and has that great matchup versus Texas. I also didn't really like any of the ones below him. I'm dropping really, really cheap in Dalton Simmons and Willy Adames. I would not roster them too much. They might be in one or two in my rosters, but they aren't going to be in a whole lot. I'm mostly just going to mix in Paul DeJong and Bo Bichette in a majority of those. Really like that value at 33 and 3,200. It's going to be hitting in the middle of the order with pretty solid matchups. Simmons, Adames, going to be in there, but DeJong and Bo Bichette are going to be the main guys. All right. Onwards to the outfielders. We talked about top guys. Betts, Cruz, Harper, Yelich. Pretty much going to be in one version. Two versions of them are going to be in all my lineups in the outfield and util. All with really, really solid matchups today. Going a little bit lower and cheaper. We mentioned the Minnesota matchup versus Detroit. Really, really like. And Brian Buxton definitely going to be in there. Hanging around in a lot of lineup. And the other one I really, really liked, Teoscar Hernandez versus the Texas Rangers. Like that matchup, batting fourth today versus the Rangers. Should be able to handle it at 3,400. You're getting a little bit of a value. And then on the cheaper end to fill out maybe a cheap util spot, maybe that third outfield spot. Tommy Pham, Andrew McCutchen, we mentioned him yesterday. He paid off yesterday. Manuel Margot, really like those three. Those are my three cheapies. Pham's at 3,000. Andrew McCutchen's at 2,900. Same with Margot. Margot just tears up the Boston Red Sox, so I'd really keep using him. And then on the really, really cheap side of things, Lourdes Gurriel versus Texas, really good matchup for Toronto. I'd throw in a couple A.J. Pollocks in there for the Dodgers versus Oakland. Oakland's really off to a bad start. And can't seem to get out of it because they keep going up against these high-end pitchers. So we can't even really even use any of the Oakland A's hitters because they keep going against really, really good pitchers. That holds true again today with Trevor Bauer. Really cheap, almost list price, Yoshi Tsutsugo versus Boston, and Taylor Trammell I might throw into a couple lineups as well. Really like Taylor Trammell for Seattle. Love this matchup versus the White Sox at 2,200. Really helps you maneuverability-wise for the outfield. All right, those are my players of the day in Major League Baseball. Let's go to the NBA. And what do we got as players of the day in the NBA? Well, in the point guard spot, we're blowing a lot of money here early on the point guards because you'll see I'll save it in the shooting guard, small forward area. But Westbrook, Irving, Doncic, I think definitely need to be rostered. All going to have huge days. Irving's got a beautiful matchup versus New Orleans, who's terrible at defense. Luka's got a beautiful matchup versus Houston, who's just terrible. And Russell Westbrook has a beautiful matchup versus Orlando, who's also just terrible. But if you're looking a little bit cheaper, I'd take a look at Jamal Murray. The Spurs have been really, really bad on defense. If you don't want those top three guys, you could save about $2,000. Throw Jamal Murray in there. The Spurs have been really, really poor, so he might be able to handle and score enough points that like the top three, but I'm definitely protecting myself with a Westbrook, Irving, Doncic. All of them are going to have big days. On the cheaper side, Terry Rozier and Michael Carter Williams were really the only two I could find that may be worthwhile if you're going to try to go cheap. Rozier at 7,400 has a decent matchup versus OKC, who's going to play really, really porous guys, and Michael Carter Williams is theoretically starting and is a starter for the Orlando Magic. There's a bad defense in the Washington Wizards, but his inability to shoot and score might come into play and hurt you a little bit in fantasy. But at 5,500, if you're trying to save money at the point guard spot, I would advise Michael Carter Williams. But you're going to be hurting if somebody else has Westbrook, Irving, Doncic, or Murray, and even John Wall or Trae Young for that matter. On to the shooting guards, and this is where we're going to save a little money. Don't like the top guys here: Booker, LeVert, Beal, or Mitchell. Going to drop all the way down to DeMar DeRozan and his 7,900 price. He's still been on fire despite the Spurs struggles. The Spurs struggles have not been on offense. It's really been on defense. So DeMar DeRozan's the first guy I'm looking at. And then we're dropping down really, really cheap into Devontae Graham, Dylan Brooks at the 6,500 and 5,600 mark. But honestly, I'd skip those two and just do a Bryce Brown, Dwayne Bacon. at 5,000, 4,800. I think those guys' numbers will be about the same as Graham and Brooks. But of the guys playing on the shooting guard slot, those were the handful of guys I'm looking at to go really, really cheap so I can expand my roster a little bit. Mihailuk theoretically can get hot. It happens every 25 or so games. He starts draining threes at 3,800. You could do worse, and he is going to start for the Thunder tonight versus Charlotte. So that would be where I'm going in the shooting guards. Small forward, once again, not touching these top guys. Ingram still looks hurt. They don't seem to want to play him. Durant should be back tonight, but my guess is minutes will be very, very limited. So there's no way I'm touching him at 8,800. And Jaylen Brown and New York off a back-to-back versus Philadelphia. I just don't love it. So I'm dropping down to Anthony Edwards at 7,400 and Michael Porter at 7,200. Really like the Michael Porter matchup versus San Antonio today. And then we're going even cheaper in Ennis. Once again, a makeshift starter for the Orlando Magic versus a very porous defense in the Wizards. So stats should be hovering around there at 5,400. Keldon Johnson always has put up solid numbers for San Antonio. It should be a high-scoring game. First, Denver, and then to get into the really cheap category, Kenrich Williams for Oklahoma City versus Charlotte has been getting starts, been putting up relatively okay numbers. So at that price tag at 4,900, I think you're all right. And then Dorian Finney-Smith versus Houston should have one of those days where Dorian Finney-Smith has a decent amount of points and solid rebounds and defensive numbers versus a really bad Houston team. So 4,500, I definitely look at that. But Michael Porter definitely is my main guy in the small forward category that I'm going to roster the majority of the time. All right, power forward. I don't think you could do anything but put Zion Williamson on your roster today versus Brooklyn. He's going to tear those old guys up in Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge. So I just... despite New Orleans never winning, Zion gets his numbers. So I'm definitely rostering Zion in a majority of them. Sabonis should be back today. Pretty nice matchup in Minnesota. I definitely look to roster him a little bit. Porzingis and Wood. Wood's the only one who pretty much can find a way to get rebounds and points versus Dallas, which is a nice little number because they don't play defense. But Porzingis versus Houston should carve them up pretty good. Cheap-wise, I didn't love a lot. I'm definitely spending money here. That's why we were so cheap in the shooting guard and small forward territory. Bridges for Charlotte will definitely have a handful of opportunities to score some points, but I'm looking really, really cheap in Maxi Kleber at 4,400 versus Houston. Really solid matchup. Should be able to get some points and open pick and roll and pick and pops for Luka Doncic and Davis Bertans. No defensive liability because Orlando has no offensive people that Davis Bertans can't guard. So Davis should be out there, whole lot of minutes, chucking threes and scoring a whole lot of points. So if I'm not going with Williamson or Sabonis, I'm probably putting Bertans in a whole lot of lineups at 3,700. Pretty good value there if he catches fire. And onward to the centers. Going to skip out on the top two guys in Towns and Capella. Capella has a pretty interesting matchup there versus Atlanta. He's been throwing up good numbers, but I'd rather have Jonas Valanciunas. Really been playing well of late, and at 6,700, really like that value. But the value here is Jokic at 10,200, just throwing up ridiculous numbers and should be able to carve up these Spurs who have been giving up about 120 plus points a game every night for the last couple weeks. So really look for Jokic to have a big day. Carter going to probably start, maybe throw that in there. But if I'm not going with like a Jokic, I really am just going to drop down and throw up. Bismack Biyombo is probably going to start today versus OKC. He does get blocks. He does get some rebounds. I wouldn't look for those hands of stone to score many points. But if he gets enough rebounds and blocks, he should be able to get you 20 and at 30.